Well, all right, here we go. Watch the streamer. Let's see. All right, we are live. It's me. Well, I am Michael J. Long. It's 5:39 on July the 2nd of 2020, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Without any further ado, I figured I bring up something that's very interesting that I think I want to talk about. All right, let me see if I can read it, and then you make up your mind whether or not you actually want to. Well, my first hope is that you'll subscribe to my channel. I guess I moved it now, so it's under Michael Long instead of Michael J. Long on the Issues podcast, whatever it was before, because I had moved that channel to my main channel, which I hadn't used much, so it replaced that one as the main channel. So I still want to do my political talks and all that on YouTube through that channel. So again, if you want to go to it, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. This is let me see here. Let me show you my YouTube channel really quick. And ta-da! As you can see on the front part of my channel, I am live. It says Michael J. Long talks about the state of affairs of here in New York. Well, actually, I'd have to rename it once I get done with this live video because I don't think that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So this is my new channel right here. So if you want to subscribe, just hit that subscribe button and then hit the bell notification on the top and click all if you want to receive all notifications. I wish I had an animated series for that. Maybe that'll help me get more views and comments and shares and likes and subscriptions, but I don't think I have quite that. I don't know if I know how to do that as of yet. But I want to show you this, what I'm reading right here. And this is from CNBC. And it says Texas issues statewide order requiring face coverings. And by the way, this is a Republican state. It's probably the most conservative state as you can get. And yet Texas Governor Greg Abbott issues an executive order Thursday, which I'm assuming is today, unless they're talking about last week, requiring residents across the state to wear a face covering in public spaces in counties with 20 or more positive COVID-19 cases. So this is probably as draconian as what the state of New York issues, which are probably just as, maybe not as draconian, but just as draconian. And then the rest of it's just all propaganda from here because it's coming from CNBC, where they say we have the ability to keep business open and move the economy forward. This is coming from Texans that can continue to earn a paycheck, but it requires each of us to do our part, blah, 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 blah. This is probably just as much garbage, as you will, as opposed to also, let me see if I can send that to stream. As opposed to Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's also said, look, non-essential businesses at work or whatever, where you're going to close out, you're going to first of all, this happened in New York too, something similar happened, where Governor Andrew Cuomo basically said, okay, anybody in the state of New York that, because we have COVID cases, this was back in March, you got to lay off 90% of your workforce or more, for any business that is quote unquote non-essential. And as you can see, I shaved, so that's unrelated to what I'm talking about. And then he said, going back to this discussion, then he said, okay, if you now all non-essential businesses have to close, and if you refuse to close, you're going to get fined $1,000 and lose your business license. And then he said, and so he says all non-essential businesses have to close, and then people were out of work for 6 months. And, we saw this in California, we saw it here in New York. I personally live here in New York State, so I see what goes on. But this is some of these policies are also occurring and traversing in the state of Texas, which is a solid red Republican state. As you may not be aware, what you might not be aware of is Texas is the third most regulated state behind New York and California. So New York State and California are both Democratic states, and Texas is Republican state. But obviously that doesn't mean diddly squat, because as we know, Texas is the third most regulated state behind New York and California. And if you own property and there's oil on your property in that state, the oil companies can just come in according to the state law of Texas and just claim, maybe not claim your property, but they can set up their oil resources and stuff on your property, and they don't even need your permission. They don't need you to, and they can do it for free. It's just ridiculous. So this is the state that prides itself as the most conservative state going, and yet according to CNBC and others, they're saying, well, Greg Abbott issues an executive order basically stating that you now have to wear a face mask when you're in public gathering. Well, if I was living there, I would have a problem with that, especially in a county that has 20 or more cases of COVID, because I wouldn't mind it so much if it was the free market, quote unquote, that was telling me, okay, look, you got to wear it when you go into my store, blah blah blah, and if I don't want to wear a mask, I don't go in that store, right? But this is the governor of Texas. If I was living there, right, and I used to live there, but if I was still living there, I'd have to comply with that. Like with 90% of the residents that live there, they don't seem to see all the conservatives that talk about Governor Cuomo or Governor Newsom out in California. They want to complain about all those draconian measures there. I'm with them on that. I agree. They are draconian. But why don't you also complain about what these Republican state governors are doing in states like Texas? Because there's very few states that have chose not to lock down during the whole pandemic thing that we experienced, and this was going on since March, basically. So now he's saying now you have to wear a mask if you live in the state and you want to go to a public place that has 20 or more cases of COVID-19. Well, and I'm not even so sure this is incongruent with the Texas state constitution. It's probably not congruent with the New York State Constitution. If this was New York, we would be talking about, but we have similar measures here in New York as well, and probably measures that are even worse than that, because, if you have a son or daughter or you have a loved one that lives in a group home or supportive apartment program, you basically can't see them. They can't come to your house, or they have to live there for the duration, or they have to stay there for the duration of the quarantine, and measures like that, which are being mandated by the state of New York, basically to mandate free market agencies that provide these such services. And of course, they're going to say, well, because we get funding from OPW, this is what we got to do. Well, this is probably why they shouldn't be getting funding from OPW, but this is going on across the whole country. And this is what I want to point out, is that it's not Governor Abbott's place to tell the residents of that state, oh, you got to wear a face mask. It's not the responsibility of the governor to do that in that state. And I know he can cry foul all he wants, but it's not his job. And it shouldn't be up to the state governments or the federal government to tell people what they should or shouldn't do. These decisions should be reserved for the individuals. All right. And so I would, as you know, I've condemned Cuomo on this. I would condemn Newsom if I lived in California as well. And this is not something that Greg Abbott should be doing. Nonetheless, he's doing it. And I don't even know if it's compliant with the state constitution in that state. I'd have to research the Texas state constitution to have a more vivid answer. But I know it does, in a certain sense, disrupt commerce, disrupt civil liberties, and it, in that sense, under normal circumstances, would violate the U.S. Constitution. And there's no doubt it does. And there's various state constitutions that it also violates in the various states that exist in this country. So, again, people pride Texas as the most Republican formed state ever. It's the most conservative, the most Republican, blah, blah, blah. And yet these are the type of policies that they have. oh, you got to wear a face mask when you're in a public event in a county that has 20 or more cases of COVID. Well, how's that any different than something like the state of New York where, you have to wear a face mask everywhere you go in public? I mean, that's no more different. And so just because it's a Republican state and Governor Greg Abbott is supposedly conservative, that doesn't mean diddly squat. The fact that he wants to violate the civil liberties and rights of the people that live in that state, right, is mind-blowing. But the fact that this goes on elsewhere, and it's just yet another example that it is not just the Democratic Party. Yes, the Democratic Party and the liberals are having policies like this at the state level, but they're not the only ones. There are other states that are Republican, that are conservative, that are doing similar things, and Texas is one of them. And I'm sorry if they don't want to hear it, but I'm going to call them out for the buffoon governor that they have. That he's trampling on the rights of the individuals that live in that state, and that in itself should be an impeachable offense, and the state legislator probably isn't going to do anything because he's a Republican governor. But if he were a Democratic governor, which I feel is not likely, then he would probably be impeached by a majority in the state legislature, most of whom probably are Republicans. It is, a Republican state, in that sense. They vote red on the presidential level on just about every election there is. And the only area of Texas that is probably the most liberal, the most Democratic would be southern Texas, but which includes the cities of San Antonio and Laredo, which are about 3 hours apart from each other. And basically any area where you have cities, in southern Texas is a higher concentration of cities and towns and villages than any other area of that state. And so I think that if they want to make a difference, the so-called conservatives, they should stop pinning it all on just one fraction or one group and realize that their party's in on it as well, their governor's in on it as well, and this should probably be a hot button issue. And I have no doubt that, this is going to be the major focus going forward for the Texas Libertarian Party and probably other political third parties. And I doubt the Democratic Party of Texas is going to fare any better if they get anybody as governor, which is highly unlikely, in terms of not doing those type of policies. But, I'm not saying it's the only Republican state that's doing it, or, the only state that's doing draconian policies like that, but it's yet one example of examples of many. And yes, New York and California are doing practically the same thing and have the same draconian type of policies. Now, these are policies that were started by the Communist Chinese Party. Their party in China did the same thing. So, in terms of why we should, embrace that, because the World Health Organization says it's what we have to do to prevent the COVID, how about you let the individuals decide what's best for them? And this is where I make my conclusion in terms of bashing the governor in that state as well as the governors in the other states who have done the same thing. And that is, people should be free to make these decisions on their own. They don't need a state governor or the president of the United States or any other aspect of any level of government telling them how they should live their lives to prevent an infection or some type of illness that they can voluntarily agree upon to prevent on their own merits, if that's something that they choose to do. So without further ado, let me finish reading. Hold on. Let me finish reading to you what this says, because there's some propaganda involved in it as well. And this article was written by Beckerly Levy, whatever the hell his or her name is, and it was published today, if you believe it or not, 2020. So they're saying, CNBC and the person that wrote this article, that wearing a face covering is public proven to be one of the most effective ways we have to slow the spread of COVID-19. Well, that's what she said. Abbott said in a press release. Well, of course he's going to say that because you know we have the ability to keep businesses open and move the economy. So now she's reading a quote from it. Yeah. Now, for those that might not know, he was also the attorney general when Rick Perry was governor in that state. And the attorney general at the time was Greg Abbott. And he basically said, about illegal immigration, that we should close our borders, stop the drugs from coming in. So he had that mantra even then. And, of anybody who ran on the Republican Party ticket, and it just goes to show you why the Republican Party cannot be reformed. Especially at the state level in that state, and also at the federal level, because they rigged the election on Ron Paul so Mitt Romney could get the nomination. He didn't win, but Donald Trump did. And now you have Greg Abbott at the state level in the state of Texas basically saying that in order to prevent this or slow the spread of COVID, you have to wear a mask. Gee, that sounds like something Cuomo would say, isn't it? I rest my case. And this is the place where you go to be free. Okay, so how are you free when you're being told you have to wear a mask? That's not freedom. That's being told what to do by your government. All right? And it isn't, so it's not just about the liberals and the agenda that they're pushing. And I don't agree with it. But the conservatives have the same problem. And between the two of them, they're the most tribalistic people I've ever known. To go at each other's throat when they both kind of support the same garbage and just take different rhetoric just goes to show you just how dumbed down this country's population is, in my opinion. All right, and I say that because maybe you have a different opinion, and that's on you. I'm hoping and I think that if this is going on in Texas and it's going on in New York and California, I wouldn't doubt that it's going on elsewhere across the country. And so the reality is there's very few states who've chosen not to lock down their economies. But a lot of Republican states have followed suit, and nobody complains about them or filing lawsuits against them. So I think that goes to show you why or how it just goes to show you it just goes to show you that, in my opinion, yes, conservatives are hypocrites, at least in my opinion, and I show that just to validate that. And maybe there's some that are on the fence that may say, well, maybe we should vote for the Libertarian Party, and I'm happy to welcome them. But at least the vast majority of the Republican base and the vast majority of the liberal Democratic base, I don't see any of that happening anytime soon. So anyways, I'm Michael J. Long. I just wanted to bring that up, that that this was going on in that state as an example to what's going on across the country. And so, as I've stated before, and as I've stated again, I stated this, I think, on one of the Larry Sharpe shows. He read my comment, but he told me right on the money, I guess, that basically the destruction of the economy, I'm not going to say we should pin it all on Donald Trump, the President of the United States, and I'm not going to say we should pin it all on Greg Abbott or Governor Cuomo. But what I will say is that the economic destruction that you see going on across the country is not the COVID-19. It's not the COVID-19 that is doing this. It is the result of government interference and the government response to the COVID-19 epidemic that has caused the type of economic ruins that we are in. So I just want to, hopefully I still have this up. Maybe I should show this video real quick. So, so yeah, um, that's basically, he basically agreed with me on that because, you know, hopefully you've seen it yourself. But yeah, and this is going on across the country. But in case you're interested, it's on YouTube. But it's basically Larry Sharp reading my comment on his show titled "Reset Capitalism," and he happened to agree with my comment, and so that's what that was about. And he reiterated, yeah, yes, if you lost your business, it's not due to COVID, it's due to the government's response to it. Again, I'm Michael J. Long. I just hope you all enjoy this video, and feel free to comment. And let's have it on my channel and on this video, and let's actually have a discussion on this. And thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.